Yes, sir.
Okay, you can all hear me. B is here. Emmanuel. Okay, cool. So good morning, everyone. My name is Dike, and we'll be spending the next 2.5 or so hours together to look at poetry and how to make it pay. I usually like to sort of get to know the people I'm talking with a bit and understand what their needs are, what they want to know, what they want to learn, and not assume that what I have to say is what you have to hear. So I'm just going to give everyone, 30 seconds to 1 minute to just tell us who you are and what you would like to take away from the workshop, what you would like to learn or know better. So I'll start with Francis. Francis, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Good morning.
Francis, are you? Good morning, Francis. So, if you could tell us, well, we can see your name already, so you can just what you want to learn at this workshop.
All right. Okay. So hello everyone. I'm Francis or Tessie. I also go by Tessie. I am interested in learning how to, how to like perform and how to set up a performance around poetry. I'm really excited by and have been to several of like your performances, and I just think it's not a way I've seen poetry performed and kind of staged before, and as a performance poet it's something that I would love to know more about, basically. So that is why I'm here, what I'm looking into.
Okay, Claire. Thank you, Francis. That was very helpful. Can I ask Dotsu? Dotsu, are you here?
Yes, I am. Good morning. My name is Dawson from Lagos, Nigeria. So basically, I write.
I'll assume Dotsu stepped away from him. Okay.
Can you hear me, please?
Hi, Dotsu.
Hi, good morning. My name is Dawson.
So what would you like to do? Yeah.
Okay, my name is Dawson from Lagos, Nigeria. I'm a writer, a poet, and an author. So basically, what I want to, like, my expectation for this class is how to mix imagery with truth while writing poetry, and how to be a better performer of poetry.
How to mix imagery with truth? Is that what you said?
Yes, while writing poetry, and how to be a better performer.
Okay. All right. Okay, thank you, Dotsu. Valentine, what about you? Is Valentine here?
Yes, good morning. Okay. My name is Valentine, like you rightly said. At a time when poetry as a genre of literature seems to be too abstract, I'm looking at how we can make it more real to the people. A lot of persons complain that it's easier to understand play and then novel than poetry. How can we make it more real and more accessible to the people so that it can as well be easy for them to comprehend? That's what I intend to learn.
Okay, Valentine, thank you.
You're welcome.
Raphael and Dufreke, what about you?
Okay, good morning. Good morning, Dickie. Can you hear me?
Raphael?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear. Please
Okay.
go ahead.
Okay. My concern is I'm a talent manager and I work with performance poets. My challenge is how, especially for young poets, performing poets, probably because they don't have like a known name or a long CV of work they've done, they don't get valued for their art. So what could be done? What ways could they better position themselves? What things could they do so that when they state their value at a certain amount, they are regarded and they are treated fairly and rewarded for their performances?
Interesting point. Thank you. Yeah, I'm good. Good to see you. How's family? Well, good. No problem. Thanks. You guys, give me a minute. I'll be back.
Debbie.
Yeah, hi, Sunny.
Okay.
Okay,
Okay, DK
people.
is back.
Sorry, I'm going to be coming in and out because I'm in the middle of myself. So just be patient with me, but I'm here with you. So Raphael, I got your point. How to, even when you're relatively unknown, how do you charge and make it stick? Okay, these are practical and pragmatic questions that we'll try and address. Valentine, how to make it more appealing to the public. Tessie wants to know better how to perform. Essie again.
Hi, good morning. Can you hear me?
Morning, I can hear you.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think the main reason I'm attending this is, in comparison to last year, I am now at least publicly sharing some of my poems, but I am still not willing to perform. So how to transition into that, and then also maybe learning how to now submit my poems for like opportunities. Most times I still struggle, like in my head, if I have to maybe perform it as an open mic just for entertainment, I can understand. So even if I get criticism, it doesn't matter. But to earn money from it, to see that it can earn money, I still struggle with that. So I'm hoping to maybe get tips or get more ginger after today's session. Thank you. Hello?
Okay, thank you very much, Essay Organic, right? So I guess we can move on. Sorry, DK has gone out again, so I'm sure he'll. Oh, DK, are you there? I see him here.
I'm back.
Okay, welcome back.
I lost connectivity a bit. So give me the gist of what Essie said. What does she want to know? I didn't hear Essie at all. As she began to talk, my internet went off.
Okay, we can bring her back. Essay, do you want to just quickly summarize?
Yeah, I said, even if I have grown in that I'm able to share my poems, I still mostly see them as for entertainment. rather than in earning for them. So in learning how to find those kind of opportunities and knowing to apply and maybe where I know I'll be paid for it, because most times people call you and say just perform something, that whole just do it without necessarily agreeing to pay for it. And you most times, because you're almost grateful that at least you're sharing something you wrote to the world, you might not bother as much. So just how to manage that space. Ending from my poems.
Okay, so issues around payments as well, and charging and how to charge and make it stick. Okay. Okay. Is this in CDB? Ekmayong? Are you there?
Yes, yes, I'm here. Feedback, Bayon. Okay, good morning, everyone. So, my name is Feedback, Bayon. I would like to know how to transition from page poetry to performance poetry. I've been stuck at that barrier for a while now. I would really like to get that from you.
How the transition from page to stage is what?
Page poetry to performance, how to start performing poetry.
Okay.
Did you get that?
Man, I can't hear you. How the transition from page to stage is
page, yes, from page to stage. Poetry. How
to make the transition? Is that what you're asking?
Yes. Yes, that's what I'm asking.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay. I get you. All right. Benga Akiwande. What about you?
Yeah, hello, good morning. Yeah.
Morning. I'm hearing you. Are you here? Have I gone out again? Hello?
So we can hear you, Dike. I think Binga is muted or something. Oh, he's back now.
Okay.
Okay, so the problem is with Binga.
Yeah, good morning. My name is Ginga. Yeah, I seem to be like the one out there. I'm not a poet. I'm just a lover of arts, and even though I study theater arts, and and I've really not been. I'm a fan of acting on stage and all that. But I've not really been to stage performance, a poetic stage performance. So I wish just to know what it entails. Maybe this can arouse or get me into that aspect. So I'm just here to learn, actually.
Okay. Understood. Chidera, are you here?
Yes, I am. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. I'm not a poet as well. I am more a fiction writer. However, I am hoping to network, interact with people here. I just really love literature, so I will get involved in every aspect, pretty much.
So you're here to socialize.
Yes.
Okay, that's fine. It's allowed to socialize.
Thank
you. Emmanuel Abedeji. Is Emmanuel here?
Good morning. Yes, I'm here. Good morning. Can you hear me? All right.
I can hear you.
just beginning into the aspect of coming into poetry. I've been writing, say, for a couple of months now, though my main purpose of being here is to learn how to improve as a poet. Those are those things I need to do to be a better poet, and also more about performance poetry, what it entails and how I can be there. So that's
okay. That's fine. Let me quickly say before I go on to the next person, I'm in between meetings. I'm on the road at the moment. If my internet connection cuts off, just be patient. I'll come back. So if you see me go off, that's what's happening. I had unexpectedly from the office a couple of meetings into which I was drafted this afternoon. And so that's why I'm so unstable. So that happened just this morning, and there was nothing I could do about that. But nevertheless, we will still run this through, and you will still get the gist of it. So, Omotola Abidemi, are you there? Omotola. Hello. Okay, you're here, but you can't speak. I can see you're typing. Okay, that's fine. So have I covered everybody? Okay, Ife Olua Adediro. Are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Hi, Dike. It's Isis. Can you hear me?
Hi, Isis. Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, so hi. I won't necessarily refer to myself as a poet. I refer to myself as a creative writer. I have dabbled in poetry and songwriting and writing fiction and articles mostly. So I'm trying to learn how to write scripts properly, and I want to dabble into theater next year. That's why I'm here.
Okay. Thank you all for being here. I hope I haven't missed out anyone else. The people I didn't call are people I know to be on the management team. So I know they're not here for the workshop. But if any of them happen to be here for the workshop, just let me know. Okay, so welcome everyone. Your pointers and points of interest are squarely what I came here to talk about. Really, this is not a workshop about writing poetry in itself. The workshop is about staging poetry, and that topic was chosen deliberately because staging poetry is one way of making poetry more commercial, more accessible to a mass market. So to tell my story a bit, and because I didn't study literature or poetry in school, so I'm not a theoretician. Everything I know from practice and from trial and error. You know, and from actually trying to get things done. You know, rather than just sitting in a classroom and learning things that may not apply in the real world. So, like many of you, I also began life as a page poet. I started writing poetry early in my life, and grew up writing poetry, and after I became an adult, you know, then had the desire to publish a collection of poetry. I published my first collection of poetry. I had some of my poems published in literary journals and things like that. So I had grown through the ranks in that sense. I had published in literary journals abroad, and all the things that sort of swell your head a bit as a young poet when you see your poem in some American journal or UK journal and things. But then quickly learned that, okay, you do all that, but then what next? Really, what happens next? So I said, okay, at least let me get my own collection out there. So I put together a collection of 60 poems. At the time, it was titled "The Revolution Has No Tribe: Contemporary Poetry on African History, Culture, and Society." It had a very long title. I put it together. I thought it was quite innovative. I had poems, I had artwork, and blah, blah, blah. And then I started trying to find a publisher for poetry. And anybody that has ever tried to find a publisher for anything, knows that it's quite hard to find a publisher. Or particularly for poetry, is even harder. And that's when I first realized that it's important to have a recognizable name, that a book is a luxury product. It's not a necessity. Nobody, if you don't buy a book, you're not going to die of hunger or whatever it is. So a book is a luxury. And like any other luxury product, what sells it is the name, the and you have to, no matter what they sell, because they have the name. And then some other people, no matter how great what you write is, you're going to have trouble selling it because really nobody knows the name on the cover. So I came up, just found it hard to find a publisher, and therefore decided to go the route of publishing myself, self-publishing, which I did. I self-published my first collection of poems and began to market it seriously, and I couldn't sell a copy of that poetry collection. I really and honestly could not sell a copy. I gave out a lot of copies, friends and family, blah blah blah. But I couldn't sell one, and it was very depressing. And then it was about that time that I stumbled into. I was invited to a meeting somewhere. Just like Essie was saying, people always come and invite you, come and read your poem. Everybody likes to listen to poetry. Nobody wants to pay for it. So I was invited to come and read a poem. Please, and if at any time I go off, you can't hear me, just type or something, let me know. I was invited to come read my poem at an event. I was in the UK at the time. So I went to the event, and for the first time saw people, I wouldn't even call it performing poetry, but speaking poetry. Because that wasn't really performance. I was just sort of reciting poetry from the top of your head as opposed to reading it from a piece of paper. And when I saw that, I said, this is interesting because the audience reaction to a poem being read and the audience reaction to a poem being said were very different. And I thought I need to start doing more of that. Funny enough, at the time, I was a public, I used to give speeches, but I had never married the ability to write poetry with the ability to public speak. So that was the first time I put those two things together, and I started speaking poetry. And the reaction was like night and day, So the title poem of my first poetry collection is "The Revolution Has No Tribe," which is a poem, a very short poem. And for 1 year, nobody had really read it, And then I stand on stage and I take a microphone and I say the poem, and all of a sudden, the poem is on everybody's lips. It just goes. So, when I found that, I poured a lot of energy into what we now call spoken. I didn't even know what it was called. People said, "Oh, this is spoken word." I was, okay, whatever you want to call it doesn't really matter to me. I wrote a poem, and instead of reading it to you, I'm saying it to you.
he tell me it's spoken word. That's fine. So I started doing spoken word, got into spoken word, joined. That's how I joined the Abuja Literary Society. Because at the time, they had this open mic thing, and I'll go every Friday and do my spoken word and get this awesome response from the audience, and then the slams, and I started participating in slams, winning all the slams I participated in, till they had a national slam. I won the national slam, and then encountered the same ceiling again. Okay, fine, I've won the slams, I've done the open mic. Okay, what else? What is that it? The only money I had ever made from all this was the prize money from the slams, and many times, the prize money isn't that much. And sometimes I would actually fund the slam or compete in the slam, so I didn't even make any money because of it. So when I came against that wall, it sort of climbed to the pinnacle of the spoken word industry. So look, I want to do more with spoken word. The musicians have shows, theater, playwrights, the stage plays. Poetry doesn't have a stage. Like, how do I present poetry in a way that it can command an audience, so that I'm not dependent on all the musician is having a show and then invites me to come and perform, or wait until somebody is doing an event and then invite me to come to the event, and they give me 5 minutes when people are eating and drinking and not even listening, so it's not even conducive for my art. How do I create the stage for poetry where it is poetry? You are coming there to listen to poetry. Poetry is the dominant art form. And really that's what led me to experimentation with different ways of presenting poetry, as opposed to simply speaking it or reading it, but now really performing poetry. So, and that's where I began to create performative pieces around poetry. And again, like I said, everything I've done is from experience. So I have published poetry collection. It didn't sell. I have done spoken word, but conventional spoken word. You get a lot of applause. Nobody pays you for it, And then I've gone into proper, what I call spoken word theater. It's an expression we coined, me and a couple of other people that do this. So the best way to describe it is spoken word theater, because it's theater built around spoken word. So I started creating spoken word theater pieces, and those spoken word theater pieces between 2015, when I sort of staged the first one, between then and now, I've made tens of millions from ticket sales, with those shows. For those of you that know, there's a particular one I called Made in Nigeria, which is a collection of 20 poems. So remember I told you I wrote a collection of 60 poems. That's how I started. I published a collection of 60 poems, couldn't sell one in a year. And then I created this stage production around 20 poems, and it's still touring. I still tour with it, and people are still buying tickets to come and see the same 20 poems. Some people have come back 3, 4, 5 times to watch me perform the same poem. And so I can definitely say, without a shadow of doubt, that staging poetry expands the audience of poetry, and it makes poetry a lot more marketable. It makes it easy to market it. It makes it easy for people to invest into it. It makes it easy for you to collaborate with other artists and other art forms. And these are all things that invariably make you more marketable. So with dancers, with theater artists, with musicians, with instrumentalists, with martial artists. It just opens the entire horizon. And mind you, I've not even scratched the surface of the possibilities with this thing. Every time I hear people say how poetry doesn't sell now, I just chuckle to myself. I've not scratched the surface at all because of my own personality. I'm an introvert. I'm very introverted. I don't really like, being out there. So I don't push. I don't market fiercely anything I do. So if somebody who has the flair for really marketing and going out there can learn the skills I've learned on the technical side in terms of creating the content on stage, all you need is just bring the marketing flair and the thing will explode. This is the kind of thing that can very easily go viral on social media, can very easily sit on platforms like Netflix and co. It's just waiting for someone that has that is interested in that, and has the marketing flair, and it will go. The problem at the beginning was creating the content that was marketable. That was the nut that had to be cracked 7-8 years ago, to create the content that could be marketed. But that nut has been cracked. It's just about now finding the channel to push things out. And I say that because, like I said, I've tested it in the rough waters. When you're interested in creating a commercial product, you don't write a poem and go and be reciting to your friends and your family and other poets, people that are friendly and will, no matter what you write, they'll say it's good, or they'll see the beauty or the relevance in it. That's not how you create a commercial product. If you're serious, whatever product you're creating, you go and test it on a hostile audience. You go to people that don't know you, don't care about you, don't, have no qualms saying, man, what kind of rubbish is this? I'm doing. And just walk out of your show. That's how you test your product. So if you take something and then you call an audience like that and they sit down and listen to you from beginning to end, and at the end of the thing, they don't even want to go, and they're asking you when is the next one, then you have a product. If you create a product and it's when it's free and your hall is full, you don't know. When you now put a ticket price, 500 naira, and the hall is still full, 1K is still full, 2.5 is still full, 5K is still full, 10K is still, then okay, I have something, that really can pass the test of time. So, in a nutshell, that's how I've ended up here this morning trying to do a workshop with you guys, because of this journey of experimenting with poetry, from page to spoken,
and now to spoken word theater. Obviously, I cannot break everything down in 3 hours. I don't even know how to do that because I'm not a teacher. I'm a practitioner. Practitioners find it hard to teach. So sometimes you need somebody to study what you're doing and then explain to yourself how you're doing it. Because how you think you're doing it may not be how you're actually doing it. But nevertheless, I will try my best to break it all down. So the first thing, while I was doing all that talking, I finally arrived in a stable place where I hope I can switch to my laptop so that I can share some of the slides that I have with you guys to make it easier to sort of talk. So we'll start with some basic ABCs, what is poetry? In fact, I need to stop starting things with that question because I really don't like that question. What is poetry? It's so academic. And it has no definition. There are as many definitions of poetry as you have people to define it. I think the best thing is often to just describe it rather than to define it. So you recognize poetry by certain features that it has. And one of them is the unnatural use of language. At this point, let me try and switch to my laptop. I can share my screen. So just give me a few minutes, okay? Let's switch over. It'll probably take too long. Okay, it's taking a long time, so I'll just continue talking. But are you guys still with me?
Yes, definitely.
Yes,
Yeah,
we're with
okay.
you.
Yes, we are.
We are with
Okay,
you,
good.
sir.
Okay. So let me do the basics quickly. Like I said, defining poetry is on some level is meaningless because everybody has their own definition of poetry. So I like to describe poetry, and for me, the poetry has three, and I have a very expanded definition of poetry. And if for those of you who have been in and around the literary circles for a while, you know that there's this raging debate that goes on, which I don't really participate in because I think it's a waste of time and energy, as to what is a poem. And poetry is supposed to be opaque and mysterious and hard to understand. And I remember when I was starting out, somebody telling me that my poems were too simple, it's too understandable. You have to grow as a poet, which to me was just well, let me not say it's nonsense, but at that time I had decided in my mind that I wanted to break into popular culture with poetry. So I had a different objective. There are different career paths for poets. If you want to be a page poet, this workshop is not about that, but there is a career path that you can actually take to become a successful page poet, from publishing in literary journals to doing MFAs in creative writing, finding a school, teaching, blah, blah. There's a career path that you can follow. But if you want to be a marketplace poet, a poet in popular culture, then many of those rules about what poetry is and how to write poetry and all these, the tidy structure and the rhyming scheme and opaque imagery they won't apply to you because none of that will sell in the market. None of that sells. If you want to be able to sell your poetry, it has to be accessible, it has to be simple, it has to be graphic, it has to use imagery that people can access quickly. I'll see if I can run through some of those things. In terms of writing poetry that sells first, before you even talk about transforming it to stage, the script itself has to be on point. So the basic features of poetry are three. Whatever kind of poetry you're writing, way poetry is constructed. Poetry is not constructed, does not need to be constructed from complete sentences. Unlike prose, you can be constructed from phrases, from sentence fragments, because poetry sort of expresses very deep emotions and very deep feelings and incomes and emotions. So sentence useful when you're writing poems. You don't need a complete sentence to write a poem. And then poetry also has an unnatural flow. Poetry does not necessarily need to go from A to B to C to D. Poetry can it can flow. It has an unnatural flow. It can jump from point to point, from time to time. It's not driven by logic. Is the thing I'm trying to say. Poetry is not driven by logic. Depending on the type of poetry writing, it can be driven by your own emotional states. That's inward-looking poetry, when the poetry is driven by how you are feeling and your emotions, and you're using poetry as a way as a means for self-therapy. But poetry can also be driven by rhythm, the rhythm of the words. It can either be, rhythm can be created by rhyming schemes or repetition. Again, this is not a workshop on poetry itself. I'm just talking about some of the features of poetry. So that's on natural flow. It doesn't follow logic. And then the last feature of poetry is its abnormal use of language. So this is the bread and butter of poetry. That you have to really be skilled in the use of what I'm calling the abnormal use of language, but really it's being skilled in the use of metaphors, figures of speech, rhetoric, so no matter how simple your poetry is, it must make very effective use of figures of speech. And in terms of simplicity, what makes a poem difficult to understand is not, what makes a poem difficult to understand is either of two things. Either you are using very big English that normally people don't use in everyday language, so they need a dictionary to check. Or you are using imagery from you're importing imagery from a culture that they're not familiar with. So if you're writing to a Nigerian audience, but you are borrowing imagery from Japan, or you're writing to a multicultural Nigerian audience and you are borrowing imagery from your deep Yoruba culture, but maybe you're performing in Kaduna, or for instance, if you say to someone who doesn't know anything, the example I always give is, if you say somebody is as quirky as a quantum particle, or John is like a quantum particle. If you don't know quantum physics, that sentence is meaningless to you because you don't know what quantum particles are. You don't know what attributes they have that the person is trying to allocate to John. So when you borrow imagery from knowledge systems or cultures that your audience is not familiar with, your poetry will become difficult to access. When you use very big English that people need dictionary to understand, your poetry will be difficult to access. And then when your poetry is too driven by your own inner state of mind, so you are just vomiting your heart, how you are seeing things. I remember emotions are not complete sentences. So you have these fragmentary images you keep creating because your poetry is driven by how you feel. Your poetry will be difficult to understand. And those kinds of poetry typically don't sell in the popular markets. They have niche markets that they can sell in. And if that's what you're interested in, then you need to focus on those markets and understand the characteristics of those markets. So you can see I keep talking about market, selling, marketing festival is about making your art work. For that to happen, yourself and start thinking of your market, thinking of who am I trying to reach? Who am I trying to sell this to? How are they? That's what should determine how you create your art. How do they receive things? What kind of things move them? So you need to understand your market to create a product for your market. And artists always have difficulty doing this because the typical artist sees himself or herself as some sort of something from God, where they see themselves as elevated prophets and seers. And so whatever it is you're receiving, you think it is sacrosanct and holy, and if people don't get it, you say the people are undeserving, or they are stupid, or they don't understand, or they are not worthy. But you need to change all that. The moment you start talking about making your art work, you need to have the heart of the artist, the entrepreneur, where you are able to see into markets, and so these are the distinguishing features of poetry. That's constructed, it has an unusual construction. unnatural flow, abnormal use of language. Art in general serves two purposes in society. I'm going to kind of rush through this. There's the functional purpose of art and therefore poetry, and there's the aesthetic purpose. So aesthetics is, when you admire something. So you admire the beauty of something. So somebody can come and listen to your poem, right? And they don't understand anything about it, but they can just admire it. They can either admire how you are talking, admire the fluidity of your speech, how rapidly you're speaking, the intelligence they assume you are displaying. People can admire your work. So that's aesthetics. At the same time, your work can have a very functional purpose. So you can use poetry to communicate, to actually pass a message that, apart from the beauty of the poetry, the underlying message is something the audience also wants to hear. It's something the audience is also interested in. So there your poetry has a functional aspect. So you can have functional poetry, you can have aesthetic poetry. And a lot of that poetry that people say, oh, this is a real poem, is difficult to understand. A lot of it is just aesthetics. Many people don't really know what the poem is talking about, but they have been conditioned to just appreciate the aesthetics of the poem, the construction, the structure, the rhyming scheme. They can admire that and feel, wow, I'm looking at a masterpiece. Just like looking at a piece of art in a museum that you don't really understand it, but well, it's a masterpiece, So you can have aesthetic poetry and then you can have functional poetry. So generally, from that categorization, you have three basic types of poems. You have what I call lyrical poems, which today is seen as classical poetry. So lyrical poems are very introverted poems, very inward-looking poems, where the writer of the poem is not really interested in talking to the world. They are sorting out their own inner states. They are trying to understand their own emotional states, and they write a poem. And it can be a beautiful poem about finding yourself or being hurt and trying to recover, but it's very inward looking. You're not necessarily trying to communicate. And these are the kind of poems that people complain about and say, I don't understand what the poem is saying. It's difficult to understand, because really it's the poet is inside himself or herself in his or her own world. And it's always hard to understand when somebody is just wandering around in their own head or in their own hearts. It can be beautiful to look at, but you may not really understand it. So these are the kind of poems that sort of people that are not literary enthusiasts, these are the kind of poems they look at or read, and it gives them headache, and they're just like, look, I don't understand this. But that's more lyrical poetry. And you have what I call proselytizing poetry. So when you use poetry, so you have a particular message, that you're trying to advocate, and you use poetry to do that. That kind of poetry has its advantages. It's the kind of poetry that can be co-opted by people or movements or organizations or brands. They have messages they want to push out, so they look for a poet that can proselytize with message, that can proselytize, that can preach, can advocate with poetry. I know a couple of poets that have are trying to really put down roots in that niche and really use poetry for ads and for things like that. But that's an area where, as a poet, you can also actually make money when you put your poetry to the service of advocacy. I don't do too much of it, particularly commercial advocacy, but I do use poetry for non-commercial advocacy, and I've also gotten a lot of jobs, a lot of invites, a lot of paying gigs, from people saying, look, can you come and speak about this? Or can you come and speak about that? But to succeed in this sphere, you have to be good at writing poems, but you also have to understand what you're talking about and actually have a good grasp of it intellectually. So it's a marriage of intellect and brain and heart. So it's not just about saying beautiful words, but it's about speaking to the point, using your poetry. So that can also, but again, that's not necessarily what this workshop is about. This workshop is about storytelling poetry. So this is when you use poetry to tell stories. And to me, for me, this is actually what classical poetry is, storytelling poetry. Because I define classical poetry as what was the first, when poetry first evolved, what was the first kinds of poems that people wrote? And the first kind of poems that people wrote were storytelling poems. Because poetry actually evolved as a way of making it easier for an audience to retain information. So before the age of writing, before mankind developed writing, when everything had to be passed orally, so you had to pass really important information, like this plant is poisonous, or don't go over there, you can get eaten there, or that tribe is not friendly, or whatever it is. When you had to pass all that kind of information orally, and so you had to tell stories. So first of all, we invent stories because stories make it easier to learn. That's the power of stories. So we've all been, many of us here, I'm sure all of us here have been at uni, and you know how your lecturer always sends you to sleep, trying to, teach you something. A good public speaker always weave in stories into whatever they are saying, because stories make things more interesting. It makes it easier for you to remember and all that. But to aid memorization, we then invent poetic techniques. So the simple, like rhyming, one of the key benefits of rhyming is that it just makes it easy to remember. That's all. That's why you rhyme. It just makes it easy to remember. That's why we have all this kind of rhyming schemes, structure, verses, and all that. So poetry at its heart is a memory aid. It makes it easy to remember a whole lot of information. And if you understand this, you unlock the key to, which is something people always ask me about a lot. How do you remember so much? I do 2-hour poetry shows and all the words are in my head. But then that's what poetry is. It's an aid to memory. It just helps you remember things. So if you master your craft as a poet, you can store hours and hours of information in your head without stressing yourself. If you really understand rhythm and rhyme and how that helps to store information. So those are the three main kinds of poetry: lyrical poetry, proselytizing poetry, and storytelling poetry. Lyrical poets today, if they want to make the career path for them is mostly academic. So you need to get into the universities and teach and things like that. It's mostly an academic path. And then even when you publish, it's not widely read, but it's critically acclaimed, because that's what the modern world recognizes as classical poetry today. But what is classical poetry shifts. So in the time of Homer, classical poetry was storytelling poetry. And that's why things like the Iliad of Homer, Odysseus, these things are regarded as classics, but really they're just poems, long poems telling stories. So lyrical poetry is the classical poetry of today, and the career path is mostly into the academics. Then you have proselytizing poetry, which is advocacy poetry, using poetry for advocacy. And that's a career path that is still there to be explored. So putting poetry to the service of marketing, advertising, social causes and things like that. So far in my own career, I've turned down every offer to use poetry to market like a brand or whatever it is, because I'm more focused on social causes. So I use poetry a lot for social causes, and that gets you a lot more invites than if you are just a poet. So somebody that was asking me questions about how do you get them to pay. If you want them to pay, you have to offer them something that is relevant to them. Nobody's going to pay you to come and recite a poem that is just relevant to you. I can come and watch it for free and just be entertained by, oh wow, she broke up last month, or her boyfriend did this to her, or his girlfriend. I can just come and listen to it for free on a random evening. But if you're asking me to pay my money, why will I pay my money to come and listen to you rant about your life or rant about your issues? But if I can see how your ability to talk can serve a cause that I am interested in, then we can talk. I can pay you for that. So these are some of the things. That's why I said at the beginning that when you start talking about selling in the marketplace, in the popular market, then you have to think of the market and think about what value am I actually delivering to this audience or to this customer or to this person? What am I actually bringing to the table, apart from me just showcasing my ability to talk, or just being a spectacle? So proselytizing poetry is there. And then you have storytelling poetry, which is why I'm doing this workshop, that using poetry to tell stories on the stage, which was a huge, really helped me to launch into new markets and see for myself that poetry can actually make a lot of money, and that poetry is actually fundamental to many things, because poetry is that literary art form that makes the best use of rhetoric. Rhetoric is the art. Rhetoric is something that the ancient Greeks actually used to study in school. It's the art of conversation. How to make talking pleasant, how to make it, that is when you are talking, people don't want you to stop talking. They just want to keep listening. How to make talking addictive, how to make it so that when people are listening to you, they just want you to keep going on. That's what rhetoric is. And it was actually a course that was studied in ancient Greece. And there are still books, I recommend that you buy some of them that just talks about the art of rhetoric. And you just see all these tricks, repetition, the law of three, saying, repeating things 3 times or 5 times or so. There is a science to all these things that we think is just random. When somebody talks and you just, when you hear Obama making a speech and you're just glued to your TV, it's not just charisma, it's not just spirit. There is a science to it. There is a construction to it that you can learn, So storytelling poetry, putting poetry on stage is what, has brought me to this workshop. And okay, so far, so good. Any questions before I move on to the next thing I want to talk about? Does anybody have questions or any clarification?
Yes, sir. I have a question, sir.
Yeah.
Can I go ahead?
Yes, please.
Okay, so you mentioned commercial advocacy. I would love clarity on that. Also, you said since you prefer to do social social advocacy, you try to avoid branding, like using your poetry to sell brands. I want to ask if is it not possible to do both, and even if it is possible, why would you rather just go for one? Is it that if you are speaking for if you're about social changes, people won't take you seriously if you start being sort of like an ambassador for brands and all that?
Okay, understood. So what I meant by commercial advocacy essentially is advertising, marketing, using your poetry to market brands, beer brands. Beer brands are very big, and as you begin to come up, they are probably one of the first kind of brands that would approach you. Banks, soft drinks, food, So there are lots of commercial brands in Nigeria that are constantly looking for new ways to bring their product to younger and younger audiences and the shifting demographic. And believe me, poetry is a powerful tool. This is not even about performance. I've had offers of just come and write it. Somebody else will say it. So even your ability to construct the sentences, to use imagery. Again, I go back to what I said earlier about simple poetry. Simple poetry is not, it's not idiotic poetry. It's not joke, it's not clownish poetry. People just say your poetry is simple because you are using imagery that the audience gets instantly. You know, so you are drawing images from Nyanya, from Lugbe, from Agege, from, you know, Mushin. So you're just drawing imagery from the active world of the audience you're talking to. So they get it immediately. And then people may say that's simple. But to the audience, it resonates very, very powerfully. So people are looking for, which is the selling point of poetry, that you are able to turn an idea, an abstract idea, into an emotive concept for the audience. It becomes something emotional, something they respond to emotionally. You know, so you can take beer and make it an emotional product. You can take a soft drink or whatever it is. You can craft a narrative that can cause the audience to connect to it emotionally. You know, like maybe talking about how when your girlfriend broke your heart, you went and took a cold bottle of beer and you just start talking about it. And they suddenly, love and beer, heartbreak and beer become synonymous or whatever it is. You know, so it's a very powerful tool in terms of advertising and marketing and telling the story of brands. And a lot of brands and companies are trying to humanize, you know, so you might have a company like Julius Berger, like, you know, Julius Berger is just roads, it's just bridges. And Julius Berger may want to introduce itself to the market as a human organization, that roads are not just, it's not just concrete. That road, you know, connects a mother to her child, connects friends, connects, you know, a bridge across ethnicity or religion, or a bridge across time and things like that. You know, so you have companies that are hard but want to be presented as soft and human to the market. And it's a poet that can help to make that transition, transform. So poetry is a very powerful tool for marketing and advertising, which is what I mean by commercial advocacy. And you can do both. You can use your poetry to advertise, and you can also use your poetry to push social projects that you're interested in. You can do both. However, you have to choose which one is more important to you, because it does affect the credit. The thing about social advocacy is that it's very dependent on your credibility as a person. The person listening to you needs to believe that you actually believe in what you're saying, that you're saying it from your heart, that this is true. That's where the power of social advocacy comes from, your authenticity, your credibility. And that's what you always have to guard. The moment people begin to think that you are a mouth for hire, it's a question of, look, if you pay this person the right amount of money, they'll say anything. You lose your credibility, you lose your authenticity, and therefore you lose your effectiveness on the social advocacy side. On the commercial advocacy, it doesn't matter. Everybody knows you're being paid to do this. It's fine. But when you're advocating social causes, you need that credibility. So even some of the biggest stars in the world, like if you look at someone like Denzel Washington, you'll hardly find him on a commercial product advertising it. You know, there are people that choose not to go into that because it has a way of making you look like you are a mouth for hire if you're not careful. You know, you just have to be careful with it, so that the day you want to actually say something you truly believe, people take you seriously. So that's why I was a bit wary about it, because one, I was coming up. I needed to focus on establishing my brand. What's the core of my brand? What am I about? People need to know who I am first before I start diversifying into other things. Otherwise, they may be confused about who I am. And if you remember, one of the things I said very early is that I realized that books, all these literary things, these are luxury products. They're not necessities. In a way, it's a necessity, but what I mean is a biological necessity. You don't have to, if you don't read a book or read a poem, you're not going to die or anything like that. So it's a luxury, and luxury products are all about branding, much more than necessities. It's all about branding. If you have a recognizable name, it becomes easy to sell. whatever it is you're saying, it becomes easy to go. So, so I made a decision very early, to try and establish a name and be known for something. And for that reason, to be known for something, you have to reject other things. It's the no. It's what you're saying no to that makes what you are saying yes to stand out clearly. If you say yes to everything, then you are standing for nothing. All right. So it's not that you can't do both. You can do both, but you have to be clear about the kind of artist you want to be. If the kind of artist you want to be, certain things don't fit into that image, then you need to say no to those things. I don't know if that answers your question, Lovely.
Yes, sir, you did, sir.
All right, thanks. Does anybody else have a question or comment before I move on? Okay, so now I'm looking at essentially writing poetry, storytelling poetry, writing poetry for stage, using poetry to tell stories on stage. The first thing I'll say to you is that always remember that between the audience and the script is you, the performer. The audience is not, they can't see the script, they're not reading the poem. It is through you that they're accessing the artwork, all right? So your performance is the only book they are going to read, is the only thing they're going to read. You're in between the audience and the script. And every performance revolves around either a monologue or dialogue, around speech in terms of poetry and stage. So at the heart of it is speech, whether it's a monologue or it's a dialogue. And speech has a basic structure. It has a beginning, it has a middle, and it has an end. Every speech has a beginning, a middle, and an end. We're talking now about constructing the script itself. Hopefully we'll talk a bit, we'll go into, I'm trying to rush through this particular workshop. I normally do it over 3 days, but I just want to rush everything and finish in an hour or an hour and a half. Stage, poetry for stage is built around speech. Speech has a basic structure, beginning, middle, and end. At the beginning, the intro is the most important part of any performance. You must always have a beginning that catches, that hooks, that makes somebody want to keep listening. All right, it's very important. You must put a lot of thought into how you start, how you begin. You must always have a strong beginning, and the objective is to catch attention. Okay, and sometimes to also use the beginning very quickly to establish who you are, what you're going to talk about, and why anybody should listen to you. If you can do that in your intro, whatever it is you're introducing, who am I, what am I about to talk about, and why is it of interest to you? So that it gives the audience something to look forward to. Like, okay, all right, And also practically, particularly saying who you are. A couple of months ago, a friend of mine did a speech, sort of a poetic sort of speech about Nigeria and the conditions in Nigeria, and put it out and it went viral on WhatsApp as an audio clip. And back to what I was saying about branding, because of the kind of brand I built for myself, whenever people hear poetry, Nigeria, a lot of them think Dike Chukwumerije, poetry, Nigeria, Dike Chukwumerije. And this is deliberate branding. I told you how if you want people to pay for what you do, you have to make it relevant to them. Which is why sometimes using poetry to address topical issues is a huge seller, rather than always using your poetry to address obscure personal issues. Use your poetry also to address topical social issues. So that's something else that makes poetry marketable. So a lot of people, when they heard that thing on WhatsApp, a poem about Nigeria, and the voice sounded a bit like mine, broken, you know. Everybody just there texting me, oh, Dike, I heard you. I had to keep telling people, that's not me, that's this person, that's not me. Because the person did not introduce himself. He didn't say who he was. So everybody was ascribing his poem to somebody else. So it's very important to say who you are. You know, my name is blah, blah, blah. If you listen to most of my presentations, I say my name is Dike Chukwumerije. I am a poet. It's branding. You know, I don't say I am a lawyer. I don't say I am a speech. I say I am a poet because I'm also trying to give value to the art form. You know, I'm Dike Chukwumerije. I'm a poet. Blah blah blah. I start my piece. You know, so that at the very beginning you know who I am. You know, you say, oh, this is poetry, because I'm doing poetry in a way that if I don't tell you it's poetry, you won't even realize it's poetry because it's so entertaining, it's so natural, it's so free flowing. So I want you to know that this is poetry because we're also rebranding poetry, which is important for the market. So you have to rebrand the poetry itself, right? So the beginning is very important, part of any performance. And you need to catch attention at the beginning. The middle is about three things. The middle of any speech is about progression, is about holding on to interest, is about ensuring comprehension. Or whatever it is you're doing, whether you're writing a script, whether you're writing a 5-minute speech, a 1-minute speech, a 30-second speech, or you're creating an entire script, it's the same. In the middle part, you have to ensure progression. All right, we can't just stay in one spot. You're just repeating one thing. We're going around one issue. From one issue, we have to go to the next. There has to be a premise and a conclusion. A story always has to be going somewhere. All right, progression is important. And this applies to all, whether you're writing a novel, a poem, a play, whatever, progression. Then you have to sustain interest. You have to ensure that you're sustaining interest. And there are many little tricks and things that you do. For instance, if you're writing a novel, for instance, one of the ways to ensure you retain interest is to conceptualize every chapter like a short story, all right? So that no chapter is just you trying to get to the next chapter. There's no transition. There's no, oh, this is just for me to get to the next point. Every detail is gripping and important in itself, all right? And in poetry, you have to watch that flow in terms of sustaining interest, the flow from one thing to another. Your flow should not be so subjective. That is this kind of lyrical poetry where you go from one random thing to another random thing that only makes sense to you or to somebody that knows your personal story or knows the story behind that thing. Is the only person that can understand the connection between this thing you talked about now and the next thing you're talking about. So you have to give your audience a flow that they can follow. So they can go from one thing to another because the brain likes it, all right? You also have to incorporate storytelling. So you're not just telling facts, you're also telling stories around the facts, using stories to illustrate facts, rather than just saying the hard facts in themselves. And another thing that helps to retain interest is creating a multi-sensory experience so that the person is, remember that you're performing, so you're giving somebody something to look at, but you're also speaking, so you're giving them something to listen to. That's already two senses being used. So they are watching and they're listening. Multisensory experiences are always more powerful than monosensory experiences. So it's always, that's why TV is more addictive than perhaps just reading a book, a badly written book, you know, because TV is engaging much more senses, you know. So in creating poetry for stage, you have to go multisensory. So it's very important what they are looking at, the colors, the movements. When we come to performance itself, that's why we incorporate all those things so that people have something to look at. Then what they are listening to, they are listening to things, and so the rhythm of your voice, the pitch of your voice, modulation, all that creates a pleasant auditory experience. Then if in addition to this is basic performance, I'm looking and I'm listening. If in addition to that, you then start creating multiple genres, incorporating multiple genres on stage. So maybe there's a bit of dance, there's a bit of drama. You're giving them multiple things to look at. It also enhances that sense of having a multi-sensory experience. If you're also creating the right ambience in the hall, you're just building it up. You're just adding more and more sensations. And the more sensations your audience are having, the more they'll remember, the more memorable it is. All right. So this is about the middle of your thingy. You have to learn. You have to have a flow. You're progressing from one thing to another. There's a flow that people can follow. You're telling stories because it's entertaining. You're creating a multisensory experience. So you're taking advantage. You're aware of the full channels by which human beings receive information. It's not just the eye and the ear. There's so many channels, and you're aware of all this. All right. That's about the middle. I don't know how deep I should go into. What's the time? 12:30. Wait, when is this thing supposed to end? By 1? Wow. Is this supposed to end by 1?
Oh, I think it's 2. It's supposed to be 3 hours. I don't know.
11 to 1. 11 to
2 hours.
Okay. Let me keep going. If I'm going too fast or I'm losing you, please let me know, because I have a lot to say and I'm just skipping, because I also want us to maybe have a bit of interaction at the end of it all. So in terms of comprehension, helping so that people really understand. I've talked about flow, and I've mentioned to you what helps flow, when there are connections between your ideas that is accessible to the audience. So don't be too random. In terms of sustaining interest, I've talked about storytelling, using storytelling as a way of maintaining interest. I've talked about the multisensory experience as a way of maintaining interest. In terms of ensuring comprehension, that people are understanding you as you're going along, again, storytelling features, but in terms of illustration. So if you make a point, you illustrate it. If you make a point, you illustrate your point. So certain tools or tips or tricks that we use to aid comprehension are illustration, contrast. When you contrast things, white and black, you put them together, it makes the white pop. Repetition is another way of ensuring comprehension. Summarization, okay? So make sure your beginning is catchy, hooks attention. Make sure your middle sustains interest. People are following, understanding what you're saying. And then have a strong end. End with a punch. Let your end pack a punch, okay? The ending is also very important. 2 things I put a lot of attention into whenever I'm creating anything is the beginning and the end. How you start and how you end. Believe me, that may be the only thing some people remember from your whole speech. How you begin, then they fall asleep and they wake up at the end. If you have a good beginning and a good end, they'll take away something memorable from it all. Okay? And so here, I remember that here I'm just talking about creating the content. So you're writing for stage. So these are some of the things I take into consideration when I'm creating. So here I'm at my desk, I'm creating, and I'm keeping all these things in mind. The creative process itself, whenever you are writing for stage, form the habit of vocalizing as you write, verbalizing as you write. What you are writing is intended to be spoken. When somebody is reading something, it's a completely different kettle of fish from when they are listening to it. It's different. So a language that works when it is written to be read may not work when it is written to be spoken. All right? So build it into your creative process to verbalize, to vocalize as you are writing, when you are writing for stage. okay? So that you begin to test ease of articulation. Who is even going to say these lines? Is it you? If you're the one that's going to say the lines, do they fit easily in your mouth as a Nigerian with your Yoruba or Igbo or Hausa or whatever accent, or with your British accent? So let's say you have a British accent and you're writing dialogue in Pidgin and you are the one supposed to say it. Can you even speak Pidgin? Can you speak it with the right intonation, inflection, and all that? So if it's not going to be easy for you to articulate it, then you can find another way to say it. You will still say the same thing, but say it in a way that is easy for the person that has to say it. So sometimes, even when we have written a script and somebody else is supposed to perform it, sometimes when you sit down and you're listening to the person perform it, you tell the person, you know what, you can change that word or you can change that sentence. You don't have to say it exactly as I wrote it, because it's important that it fits in your own mouth. The important thing is this is the message, or this is the message that has to go out to the audience. So if you're having trouble articulating this particular sentence the way I wrote it, then find your own words, but just make sure the message goes out. You know, so this is when you're writing for talking. Right, so ease of articulation is important. The naturalness of the sound, you know, not when somebody who does not have a British accent is trying to form British accent, and so annoying. Unless the character is somebody like that. If the character is like that, that's fine. But if you're actually supposed to have a proper British accent and you don't have one, you know, then either find somebody that has a proper British accent or change the thing to suit your own natural sound. So ease of articulation, naturalness of sound, ease of comprehension. So you can write a convoluted sentence and somebody can read it and understand because they read at their own leisure, at their own pace. So you can write a really long sentence and the reader will understand it because he can stop, break, think about it. But when somebody is listening to you, they don't have that luxury. They can't pause you, sorry, not pause you. They can't tell you, oh, stop, wait, let me think about what you just said before you continue. They can't do that. You're just going to keep talking. So you have to be conscious of that and use sentences that's why when we are writing for stage, we use short, direct sentences to make comprehension easier. And we try and avoid convoluted, abstract, indirect sentences that people may need a bit of time to understand. And so you work that into your performance. If you know that what I just said may be difficult, or the sentence I'm about to say may be difficult, then you slow it down. You say it slowly. You know, you pause. We'll talk about the dramatic pause, or the use of silence in performance. You know, but you talk slowly so that people can get it. So oftentimes when you're directing people who are about to go on stage, is one of the things I tell my artists a lot. Take your time. Don't rush it. Don't rush whatever you're saying. Take your time, you know, because people are listening. And if you talk too rapidly, they won't sink in. But here I am talking so rapidly. Well, that's because I'm rushing. I'm trying to cover as much ground as possible. Okay, so all these are things you take into consideration when you're writing, when you're creating that thing for stage. The beginning, the middle, the end, and build into your creative process, vocalization, verbalization, saying it out loud. Don't just spend the whole time hunched over the table, writing. After a while, pick it up, stand in front of a mirror, say it, and see how it feels in your mouth, see how it sounds as it comes out, okay? So any questions at this point, anything anybody wants to say before I move on to the next segment? You guys are awfully quiet. Are you still with me? I know that.
Well, with you, we're just in awe.
We are with
We are
you.
in awe. Yeah, all struck. Yeah.
We're here.
Yeah.
We're just taking everything in.
I'm here.
Okay. Thank you for letting me know. Because sometimes you just wonder if you're talking to yourself. Okay, that's good. So we've talked a bit about, at the beginning, I told you my story to let you know that poetry can sell. You just have to find the right form. And be more market oriented. Don't be afraid to think of the market. It doesn't make you dirty as an artist that you're thinking of money and getting paid. It doesn't diminish your art form in any way. So learn to think about the market that you're trying to break into and what will sell. In fact, I remember before all of this, before people knew who I was, I had written 9 books, 9, you know? And I remember many years ago, my brother was reminding me, when we start having serious conversations about, okay, you know, I'm tired of just writing, nobody is reading. I really want to put myself out there. We had a very serious conversation about which of your works should we market first? And we settled on a novel called Urichinder. And the reason why we settled on it was because it was funny, it was relatable, it was simple. We knew that, look, whether you like reading or you don't like reading, if you start reading that book, you will not stop until you put it down. So what were we doing? We're thinking of the market. We didn't go with the book that meant the most to me, because that was not the book that meant the most to me. That was not the literary work that meant the most to me. We went with the book that we felt would be the easiest to break into the market with. All right. So many times also when you're called to do a performance on stage, you have to think about that. How do I break the ice? The moment people laugh with you, you have them. You have them because they've bought into you. This is the power of branding. The moment somebody buys into you, after that, if you're even talking rubbish, they will be laughing. They'll be with you because they like you. They've bought into you. All right. But before people buy into you, you'll be sweating on stage and they're just looking at you. So one of the things I also did in my career was to deliberately write what I call icebreaker poems. Poems that are just designed to make you laugh, just to make you giggle or chuckle or go. Icebreakers, just so that you can buy into me. The moment I can get you in, then it's a piece of cake after that. Again, that's the market mindset. You're thinking about your audience. You're thinking about them, not just using poetry as a way of therapy, which is important too. I'm not knocking it. It's important sometimes to write poems that are about you and using your poem to heal your heart. Very important. But when we start talking about making poetry work commercially, then you really have to think about the market. What are the topical issues? What are people talking about? What do people want to hear about? That's what you should be writing poetry about. And in a way that they also like. So you speak to topical issues, you speak to issues that people want to hear about. Just that you then bring your capacity and your capability as a poet to bear. That gritty use of imagery, not always using all this highfalutin, high-sounding, silky imagery imported from America and all that. It won't, people they'll clap at it, right? But it won't really enter the market. You have to talk the way Nigerians talk. You have to use the imagery Nigerians use. You know, I will slap you, waiting to worry you. You know, you have to calm down as you're creating poetry and create it from the language, from the sweat, from the grittiness of everyday life in Nigeria. And then elevate that. That's what needs to be elevated. So you can't, that's why I always, I go out of my way to stress at all these open mics, speak in your natural voice. Don't come to the stage and say, hello, my name is Dike. I want to do a poem. And then the moment your poem starts, you start switching to some American accents or some British accents or some. Don't do that. Speak in your natural voice. Use your natural vocabulary. Tap into Niger, the way Niger English is different from UK English, is different from American English. When Americans are talking, they use American English. They are interested in their local market. The international market is secondary. But with Nigerian artists, the international market is first and the local market is secondary. And that is one of the weaknesses of our art and creative sector. Because we think that, oh, people will not pay for it. But people will pay for it if you create it in a way that is relevant to them. That's how the Nollywood blew. That's how comedy blew. they didn't blow by focusing on the international market. They focused on the local market till they cracked it. There is nothing like going international after you have cracked your local market. There's nothing like it. That's the real success. It's not when you go and succeed internationally, then come back. You don't have the same respect, not even in the international market. But when you succeed in the local market and from there you are going out, you come out with a lot more respect than the opposite way around. So let us learn to appreciate Niger English, local imagery. I'm not saying that you have to speak local. I'm not saying you have to speak local like you are from the ghetto. No. You can speak sophisticated Niger English. You understand? Niger English has levels. So that's really, really important that you speak in the language of your environment and you really target your local audience. Okay, I've already sort of gone into what I want to talk about next, which is really building performative elements into your poetry. So now really you've written the script. Now, how do you bring it alive on stage? How do you begin to perform? I've told you performance is not just spoken word. It's not just about speaking. It's a whole body thing. All right. And what is performance? Performance is bringing your work alive. It's making it come alive for people. So that imagine that you're listening to somebody, but all of a sudden you are watching, you are seeing what they are talking about. I love that expression. When people want to say they really understand something, they say, I see. Yet they are listening, but they say, I see. So it shows you how from just talking, you can begin to unlock other senses that people are working with. And that's when you know that you're really penetrating, when it becomes a multi-sensory experience within the audience. When somebody starts to see what you are saying, when they start to taste what you're saying, when they start to smell what you're saying, when they start to feel it. You're talking about pain or abuse, or they feel it, they cringe in their seats, and you know that you're performing, And to perform, the greatest tool, well, to break it down, every text, there are objective performance cues and subjective performance cues embedded into every text. So to perform a text correctly, you have to read the cues. The objective cues are there. Every text you pick up will have comma, it will have full stop, it will have exclamation point. All those things that you don't, when you are reading out, you don't read them, but they are there for you to see. Those are all performance cues. So a comma tells you to pause. A full stop tells you to pause. An exclamation point mark tells you to raise your voice. Quotation marks tells you to create characters, to characterize. So all these are performance cues that we see all the time. It's just that we ignore them when we're reading. But obviously, if you've ever had to read to a child, read a bedtime story to a child, you know what those cues are. So if Daddy Pig is saying to Mommy Pig, Daddy Pig says to Mommy Pig, let's go outside. Automatically, when you're reading to children, you characterize. When you see those quotation marks, you create a character. You pause, so you're obeying the performance cues in the text. It's just that many people, when they are reading to adults, they stop obeying the performance cues. But the performance cues are there to help you bring the text alive. If you don't obey the performance cues, the text is dead. It's just on the paper. What brings it alive is obeying those. You start by obeying the objective performance cues, the ones that are there written for you in full stops and commas and inverted commas and all that. Then secondly, to bring a text to life, you have to read between the lines also. So apart from reading those inscriptions that you don't verbalize, like commas, you also have to read between the lines. Reading between the lines means when you're reading about a woman or a character in a script, nobody, how do I say this? Okay, let me put it from the perspective of the writer. When you are creating a character, as a rule of thumb, You should always know more about your character than you write on paper. All right. So whatever your character you're creating, you should have more information on the character than what you put on the paper. So you should know your character more than what you reveal and what you say about them. So your character should have a backstory that does not make it to the script, because that's what informs how they behave. It's just like how I behave today is a reflection of where I'm coming from. So how I'm talking to you now is a reflection of where I'm coming from, but you don't know my backstory. But everything I am doing, how I'm behaving, is a reflection of my backstory, of my history. It's the history that makes the behavior understandable. So as a writer, whenever you're writing, your character should have a deeper backstory than if everything about your character is on the script, then your character is too shallow, it's too flat. Now, as somebody who is interpreting a script, who is reading between the lines, your job is to ask yourself, who is this person? This person I'm about to vocalize, who are they? And imagine who they are. Try and imagine what they look like. Try and imagine what kind of clothes they wear, how they walk, where they were born, what happened to them. Why are they so angry? Why are they so happy? It's the why, trying to understand the character. You need that information to bring the character to life. The writer of the script will not be there to tell you. This is where the moment somebody writes a script, it's out of their hands. You are free to imagine the character how you want to imagine the character. Who are they? But you have to bring that character to life in your mind. And that means using what? Your imagination. Imagination is the strongest tool when it comes to performance, to bringing a character to life, a script to life. You have to imagine the backstory, So you have to let your imagination run wild when you're reading a script you're about to perform. What do you see when you are reading the script? What sounds do you hear? What do you smell? How do you feel? How do the words sound in your inner ears? Do the words feel heavy or light? Do the words have a taste? Do you know that you can be reading something and you suddenly just feel sad? The thing may not in itself be, the words may not be saying anything sad, but there might be something in it that just triggers a sad feeling within you. Or you might be reading something and you suddenly just start having flashbacks from your own life. Specific flashbacks from a particular. When you're reading for performance, to perform, you have to be very conscious of all the emotional responses you're having to the text. Very, very conscious. Where does it make me sad? What word triggers sadness? What images does it conjure up? How do I feel? You have to be very sensitive to your emotional responses to the text. And why is this important? Because performance is about non-verbal communication. Performance is the art of non-verbal communication. I can't say this strongly enough. Performance is not what you are saying. That's why I said performance is not spoken word. It's not just speaking the words. Performance is the art of non-verbal communication. And emotions do not communicate with words. Emotions communicate non-verbally. When you are sad, it is not in saying I am sad that I will know that you are sad. You can say I am sad and I look at you and say, you're not serious, because of the non-verbal cues I'm getting from you. You can tell me I'm angry and I'll be like, I better get out, because of the non-verbal cues I'm getting from you. Emotions don't communicate verbally. It doesn't matter what you're saying with your mouth. It is what you're saying with your body that communicates the emotion. So you can say, I love you and I see that you hate me. You can say, I am so happy and I see that you are so sad. Different from what you're saying. And that is why you have to understand the emotional imprint of the text. What emotions is the text provoking?
What emotions is the text supposed to provoke? Because emotions communicate non-verbally. If you understand the emotions, then you understand the non-verbal cues you're supposed to do and talking. It's not in what you're saying. It's in whether you are giving off the right non-verbal cues to bring the words to life. So emotions communicate non-verbally. Performance is the art of non-verbal communication. And how do emotions communicate? They communicate through movement. They communicate through sound. Sound is not words. Like if I say, ah, that's a sound. Or I say, eh, whoa, that's a sound. It doesn't mean anything. It's a sound. So emotions communicate by sound. Emotions communicate by posture. A slouch shoulder, raised shoulder, a head bent forward, a head tilted to one side, tilted to one side, bent. All these things are sending out copious amounts of information to the listener. Emotions also communicate by facial expression. So performance is in mastering the non-verbal ways in which specific emotions communicate. That's all it's about. And to do that, you have to understand what is the emotional undertone of the text. What emotions is this text supposed to provoke in the listener? What emotions does it provoke in me? And then when you are saying the words, you say them with the non-verbal cues that allow those emotions to come alive in yourself and in your listener. Because if the emotion is alive in you, the emotion will be communicated to the audience. That's why I said that if you tell me you are sad, but I cannot see that you are sad, I will not believe that you are sad. If you tell me that you are happy, but I cannot see that you are happy, then I will not believe that you are happy. So if you are trying to communicate sadness to your audience, or gravity to your audience, or happiness to your audience, and they cannot see it in your body, in your movement, in your sound, in your posture, in your facial expression, then they will not believe it. And if they don't believe it, then the words will fall flat, and you haven't succeeded in bringing the word to life. All right, so performance is the art of non-verbal communication. Clarity about the emotional character of a text leads to high quality performance of that text. If you don't even understand the emotional message in the text, then you can't perform it. So, but when you are clear about the emotional signature of the text, then you can give a high quality performance. Emotion communicates non-verbally. Performance is the art of non-verbal communication. Get the emotion right, you get the performance right. I always tell people that it is better to forget the words, but get the spirit in which they are supposed to be said. It is better to model the words, but be accurate with the emotion, with the spirit, than to remember the words exactly, but get the spirit or the emotion wrong. That is bad. That is completely bad. But if you don't remember your lines and you begin to mumble and fumble, but you are accurate with the emotion and the spirit, you will still have a strong performance, because the audience does not know what the words are. They don't know. They're not reading the script and saying, oh, you missed and, oh, you missed but. No. The audience is watching you. And what the audience needs to receive from you is the text alive. It's the spirit. It's not the words. So when you fumble your words, but the spirit is still accurate, they are still interested. Because in real life, it can happen. You can be so angry, you start stuttering and saying nonsense. But everybody knows that it is anger. And that's what is important, that you are communicating anger. But if you are there, you are reciting your lines perfectly, but I cannot see anger, it's a waste of time. The text is flat, it's dead, it's on the page, it's not on the stage. So get the emotion right, get the performance right. And performance is not, like I said, it's not about jump. I'm not asking some of you may be looking and thinking, oh, but I'm so introverted. Oh, I can't dance. I can't. No, it's not about jumping around on stage. It's about if a text is supposed to express sadness, you as a person, when you are sad, how do you express it? Some people express sadness with silence. Some people express intense joy in a very muted way. But anybody looking at them still knows that they are happy. What does your body do that communicates happiness? That is what you need to assume on stage. You don't have to do it. No two people can perform a text the same way, because the way two people express emotion naturally is different. All right? So get the emotion right, you get the performance right. And in this sense, there are two kinds of performances. There's the intuitive performance and there's the constructed performance. The intuitive performance is when you are actually feeling the emotion. You are actually feeling the emotion that underlies the text you are supposed to perform. That is the ideal situation. If you are on stage and anger is required and you are actually angry, you don't need much direction. You will just flow. If you're on stage and sadness is required and you're actually sad, if you're on stage and gravity is required and you're in that emotional state, that's an intuitive performance. You will just flow. But my brother, my sister, that does not happen. The moment you put any human being on stage, they lose the ability to perform intuitively. I don't know why. The standing on stage is the nervousness, everybody is looking at you. You just lose, you can't. So most times on stage, you need a constructed performance because you're not in the emotional state intuitively. You're not there. At least at the beginning. After a while, you may get into it. But at the beginning, sometimes you need to construct the performance, And how do you construct a performance? Well, if you understand that what I have just said to you, that get the emotion right, you get the performance right. The problem with constructed performances is how do you evoke an emotion you are not feeling? Like, all of these actors that can just cry on cue. Like, how do you just cry on cue? But if you ask them, they'll tell you that they go to a sad place inside them. They go and remember something sad. Even that one is there. It's something else to cry like that. But to evoke an emotion you are not feeling, you reverse engineer, you imitate. So what do you do when you are sad? How does your body behave when you are sad? You just simply have to reconstruct those body cues. Even if right now I'm not feeling sad, but if I remember what I normally do physically when I'm sad, then I just start doing it. So you begin to put your body in the positions it would normally be in if you're sad. And it works. If you put your body in that position, you find that slowly you begin to feel the emotion. I don't know why, but I don't know the science behind it, but I just know that it works. And if you actually slouch your shoulders and bend your head forward and think about something sad, slowly, and then you start saying the words, you just find that as you're saying it, the emotion starts to rise, and it becomes more of an intuitive performance. So to construct a performance, you start with imitation. You remember, how does anger express? How does sadness express? How does intensity express? How does weirdness express? It may not be you. You may also build up an archive by observing your surrounding closely. How do other people, because you don't just want to have, as a performer, you don't just want to have one bag of tricks. So you don't always want to express sadness in the same way. So sometimes you look at your brother, your sister, your friend, when they're sad, how do they do? And you copy it on stage. You just do what they do, how they express sadness. To call up the emotion, to evoke the emotion. The moment the emotion is right, and the non-verbal cues that follow the emotion are right, the performance will be right. Okay. So emotion expresses itself through movement, through sound, through posture, through expression, sorry. And those are your performance tools, your body, your voice, your face, your eyes. Those are your performance tools. Before we start talking about props, before we start talking about costume, before we start talking about lighting, before we start talking about sound, I always tell my artists, you are the performance tool. You are the primary performance tool. The moment you, the actor, are getting the performance, the story will come alive. Even if there is no sound, even if there is no lighting, even if there is no costume. Because that was how it was when we were younger and we sit around to tell stories and your elder brother, elder sister is telling a story. There was no lighting, there was no costume, there was no sound, there was no music, there was no props. But you enter the story because of the performance. It is the performance that is the storytelling. It's so important, it's so key. Don't keep thinking that until you are wearing the costume and painting your no. I remember once I was about to do a show. Just as we were about to start, we had spent the night before and the entire day setting up, putting the lights in place, the fancy stage lights, and everything to create the ambience. As we were about to start, the electrical box in the place caught fire. All the lights, stage lights went. All the ambience just disappeared. And we had to run the show with the normal house lights. But the audience didn't notice. Because with the performance, you draw them into the world. So what they are not seeing with their physical eyes, their brain, the brain is a wonderful thing. It can be, once you prompt the brain, it creates the world you want it to create. So that mood you're looking for, the audience in their brain will create the mood. If you are giving them the performance, if you're giving the brain the performance it needs to believe that this is real, this is real. So the performance is so key. Your body, your voice, your face, your eyes, your lips, these are your performance tools. All right? With your voice alone, you can create multiple characters, even if you don't know how to speak different accents. With your voice alone, because there are so many things you can change about your voice. The pitch, whether it's high-pitched or low-pitched, the texture, whether it is rough or smooth, the speed, how fast or how slowly you're speaking, the style, whether you're clipping your words or you're rolling them into the next sentences, the volume of your voice, whether you're loud or low. And finally, the accent, if you can do accents. So the voice has so many things you can tweak about it to create characters. Simply by changing the pitch, giving one character a higher pitch and the other character a lower pitch, you create two characters. Simply by changing the speed, making one character speak quickly and the other character speak less, you create characters. And characterization is important, like I said. But the moment you see those inverted commas in a text, that means you need to create a character. And with your voice alone, you can create characters. So these are different things, the character or the voice, the projection of your voice being heard at the back of the room. I always tell people, speak to the back of the room, don't speak to the front. Projection is not about shouting. It's about the attention of people to the stage so that they want to listen to you. If you stand on the stage with confidence, then you draw their eyes to you. And then you project from your belly, not just screaming. And then the most important thing about voice is silence. Silence is a powerful performance tool, a powerful performance tool. Even me, I'm still trying to master silence. Because many times when you start getting comfortable with silence, you're not in a haste to fill it with conversation. It's like when you truly love someone, how do you know? You're comfortable with the silence. You don't have to talk. That's how it is on stage. The more comfortable you become, the longer those pauses between as you're talking. You're not rushing, because that rushing to talk is nervousness. You're nervous. And when you're nervous, your audience is nervous. Everybody is uncomfortable. You're rushing to talk. You're talking so fast many times because of nervousness. As you become comfortable, you start wielding silence to greater effect. Those commas, those full stops. Silence builds suspense. Suspense is the heart of a good story. When people are waiting for the next thing. Silence builds suspense. Silence allows the audience to marinate in the emotion, to stew in it. Silence signals importance. It tells them that either what I just said or what I'm about to say is very important. Silence adds weight to whatever you're saying, adds weight and gravitas. Silence demarcates segments. The same way when you're reading something, you have paragraph breaks that demarcate paragraphs. Silence serves the same purpose in speech. Silence can help differentiate characters so that we know that you are switching from one character to the other character. Silence gives you that space to control your breathing. Breathing is the heart of speech. If you don't have breath control, you can't perform. Silence helps you recover from error when you make mistake. Silence is where you go to recover. If you know how to use the silence. If you don't know how to use silence, then you don't have spaces to recover, to think ahead of what am I going to do next. Silence is a powerful tool. You can even have a whole workshop on silence. Your face. How do you put emotion into your eyes? You practice in the mirror. How to have an intense stare. How to have an open gaze. How to communicate with your eyes, your brows, your lips, the tilt of your head, your face. All these things are performance tools. Your body, Anyway, these are not things. These are things that really we should be in the same space so we can demonstrate. This one is too practical to be talking about it over Zoom. Your body, shoulders, straight or slouched, back, straight or rounded, hips, pushed in or pushed out, hands. Where are your hands? What are you doing with your hands? Are you confusing us? Are you misdirecting us? You're talking and your hands are doing things that have nothing to do with your speech. So you're directing attention away from what you're saying with your hands, or are your hands complementing your speech? Your legs, how are they positioned? Your fists, are they clenched open? Your positioning, your movement on stage. You have to be deliberate with movement. You don't just move. Where are you moving to? Why are you going there? Why are you moving? These are the questions you ask when you start mastering the stagecraft. Nothing on stage is wasted. Nothing on stage should be without meaning. Avoid everybody when they're nervous. The nervousness always shows in movement unless you control it. So whenever you're nervous, there's something you do. It's called the nervous tick. Some people may just, touch their hair or touch their ear or start tapping their feet or there's something everybody does physically when they're nervous. So you have to, unless you master it. Because on stage, every movement must be deliberate. Every movement must have a meaning. So you have to be deliberate with movement and position. And to master stagecraft is to overcome stage fright. To give a good performance, you have to be tensed but relaxed, anxious but not afraid. If you're too relaxed, you can't perform well. There has to be some adrenaline coming in, so there has to be some tension. But the tension cannot be too much, otherwise it will cripple you. So it's that balance. You're tensed, but you're relaxed. You're anxious, but you're not afraid. So if you watch athletes before they perform, an athlete, they try and keep their muscles. You don't just go from a cold start to running 100 meters or entering the boxing ring. You see them loosening up, doing stretches, jogging, bouncing, whatever. That's what you also need to do before you step on stage. Because your body is the tool. You're using muscles, the muscles in your throat, the muscles in your diaphragm, the muscles in your stomach, the muscles in your neck. You're using muscles. So you do breathing exercises, like I'll do breathing exercises, I'll do vocal exercises, I'll do some stretches before, when I'm backstage getting ready. Because if the body is loose, it helps you counter stage fright, because this thing that what stage fright does, remember when the human being is afraid, what is it? Flight or fight or fight response. But on stage, you cannot fight, you cannot run anywhere. You cannot fight, man. There's nobody to fight. So what happens is that people freeze. So that's what stage fright causes. It doesn't cause you to run or fight, it causes you to freeze. Your body becomes stiff, your throat becomes stiff, your mouth becomes dry, and all these things affect vocalization and articulation. How can you talk with dry mouth? How can you talk with stiff neck? How can you perform with frozen body? So that's why you do all these exercises and you loosen up, so that the performance tool, even if you are afraid, you don't allow it to freeze your body. You loosen it up before you get on stage. You get the blood vessels flowing. Rehearsal is also another tactic for countering stage fright. You rehearse like crazy. You rehearse and rehearse and rehearse and rehearse and build muscle memory, so that you don't need to remember. Your muscle will remember by itself what it's supposed to do on stage. No matter how many times I perform a show, before I get on there, I rehearse it. You know, sometimes it's good to go ahead, case the joints, look around, familiarize yourself with the stage, the place. Then there are also mental things. I need to be wrapping up now. I have so much else to say, but I have to wrap up. So I'll try and breeze through. Casing the joints, go and look at the place. Then mental exercises, ask yourself, why am I doing this? If you have a purpose, it's easy to overcome stage fright. Worst case scenario, what's the worst that can happen? These are ways of overcoming stage fright. You ask yourself, what's the worst that can happen? They don't understand me, but no problem now. They know me before. I'll just go. Best case scenario, what if I nail it? You know, sometimes you imagine that, or pick a friendly face in the audience. If there's no friendly face, gaze away into the great unknown and look as if you are having a vision and talk into the great unknown, you know? Or close out the audience completely, close your eyes and get into your imagined space to allow yourself to, you know, lose the stage fright and get into your performance. The last thing I would really like to talk about, but I don't have time, is constructing the space for performance. And by space, I mean everything other than your physical body used to enhance or enrich the performance is what I mean by space. Everything other than your physical naked body that is used to enhance or enrich your performance is what I mean by space. So the physical space, the stage, the hall, the venue, the sound, the lights, the props, the costumes, all of this is space, you know. And I don't have time now to go deeply into space. It's a whole thingy. But this is where we talk about the stage and knowing the stage. And when you see the stage, it can also affect how you perform. Are you far removed from your audience, or are you close to your audience? You know, when it's a big stage and you look small on it, how do you expand to fill the stage? How do you shrink? How do you shrink a big stage? You know, these are all things of performance in terms of constructing space and filling space. But people, I have to wrap up here because I want you guys to hear a bit, ask questions and all that. And just get feedback, and let's talk a bit. This theory is practical. So let me hear your questions, like I'm answering practical. So I'll choose my own lecture here. So please, if you have questions and stuff, let me know so we can talk about it. question? Hello? Nobody has questions.
I have a question.
Yeah, please.
All right. Thank you so much, DK. This has been incredible. I've just been taking notes and just been awestruck, like everyone said. But my question is, when you mentioned earlier, you talked about how if you're reading the text that you're going to perform, and it's maybe not text that you have created, right? But like you're reading it and you're going to perform it, and you have to kind of come to terms with the emotions that you're feeling as you read it, because that can kind of feed into your performance. How do you know if the emotions that you're feeling are actually useful for the performance, I guess is my question. Are they all useful?
I understand what you mean.
Like, yes, exactly. Or do you have to kind of discern and navigate what is actually relevant and not just something that is maybe triggering your own past personal experiences or something?
It's all useful. It's everything you feel is useful, and it may not. This is where it doesn't even matter what the writer intended or how the writer saw it.
But every emotion it triggers in you is very useful because it's critical to authenticity on stage. It's critical to being believable on stage. In fact, the more personal stories and personal things it draws out of you and triggers in you, the more powerful your performance will be. Because deep calls to deep, heart to heart, soul to soul. You can't really fake these things. A powerful performance comes from within. So every emotion it triggers within you, when the words you hear, you need to hold on to it. And being in a strong emotional state also helps you overcome stage fright, because the moment somebody is actually angry or sad or they don't have stage fright. A person in an emotional state does not have stage fright. They will emote, they will send out that signal. And that is what the audience is coming for. They are coming to be moved, to laughter, to tears, to introspection. They came there to be moved. So if you don't move them, you've not achieved anything. And it's your emotions, it's the degree to which you have been moved yourself. That's the power you're going to put out on stage. So every emotion, you might decide to modify or edit how much of the inside that I don't want to defense in your life. You can literally, if you let yourself go, you can break down on the stage, but I don't want to go that far. All right, I'm not going to go that far. So, but I'll use a bit of that. I'm still going to use a bit of that to color this performance. So sometimes you read a script and you lost someone in the past, and the script triggers those memories. But you're not going to have an emotional breakdown on stage, but you're still going to use a bit of that emotion to color the performance. That's what's going to give color and put life in that performance. So emotions are not like, it's not like speech. It's not like saying, oh, this thing I'm saying doesn't fit the script. You need every emotion it evokes in you. You really do. Either you're going to use it proactively to get yourself in the mood and overcome stage fright, or you will use it to color the performance itself, color the thing that's coming out of your mouth. But emotions are always useful on stage, always. My own greatest struggle is even to learn how to be more and more, open on stage. Less and less self-conscious, because I know that the more in the emotion, the more in the mood I get, the stronger my performance. So I always
Yeah, yes, it does. Thank you so much. Actually, just kind of following from that, I feel like, so
Hello?
I tend to, hello, can you hear me?
I can hear you, yes.
Okay, great. Yes. So I tend to have this sometimes when I'm like talking about certain pieces, like if I write it like in the first person and I want to like convey that emotion, is there ever anything, I mean, aside from, you know, the very physical or obvious like emotional breakdown, is there ever any situation of like maybe sharing too much or displaying too much emotion on stage? Aside from like, you know, the obvious like breaking down, like, you know, like maybe like getting lost in like what you're doing, is there another line? Hello, can you hear me?
Is that in fear of getting lost in what you're doing?
No, is there too much, like is there a way for you to be too open on stage or too or maybe sharing too much emotion on stage? Is that something that can happen in like your work and in your performance, especially as you try to toe the line of like trying to evoke emotion from the audience and be you know, representative of like the work that you're sharing?
My internet connection is breaking up, and I keep missing the gist of it.
Okay. So I don't know what if you were able to hear any of it, but basically I was just asking like if there's a way for like, aside from like, you know, you mentioned, okay, you shouldn't have like an emotional breakdown on stage, but is there any other like boundary that shouldn't be crossed when one is doing I guess a poetry performance, a stage poetry? Like, is there any other line in terms of like expressing emotion on stage? Maybe I could write it down, that might be better. Or at least like,
Is there any other line? Is there
yeah,
any other line?
yes, any other line, any other boundary, or any other way of, you know, like saying this is
Any
maybe
other
too much?
boundary shouldn't cross?
Yes, exactly.
Or any other boundary shouldn't cross? Oh, okay, I understand the question. It's an interesting question. I would say, I'm on the road again. That's why my internet is going on and off. So please let me know if you miss anything. I would say that one line I am wary of crossing, and that if you're not careful, you can cross on stage, is to put out too much of yourself, of your own personal story. Remember that the idea is to use your personal stories and emotion to color the performance. It's still a performance. You're not there to show yourself. You're not there to show your own self. You are there to use yourself to aid the telling of a character's story. But if you're not careful, you can just find yourself saying too many things or showing yourself too much, your own personal self or your own personal story. I don't know if that makes sense, but particularly when you are performing and at some point you begin to improvise, you know, you're changing the script, you're using your own words, you're improvising. If you're not careful, you might find yourself saying things and later you think, why did I say that on stage? I shouldn't have said that on stage. That's too personal. Or that was not my story to tell. That's somebody else's story. Why did I say that on stage? So that's another line you sort of have to be careful about. Does that make sense?
Yes, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Tessie. Any other questions or comments or observations? I haven't been reading the chat.
I have an observation.
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay. Like I said earlier, I am more a prose fiction writer. Well, I was very certain this would be insightful, and it has been a very good use of my time. I'm excited. I find that being a prose writer, I struggle with this simple writing that you spoke about, where, I write something and after a while I read someone else's work, complex writers like the James Joyce, the ones that write more stream of consciousness writing. So when I'm done reading all that, I end up juxtaposing with my own work, then I conclude it's not good enough. But I'm glad to hear this because it means there's a place for simple writing. And I even find that the best prose writers they employ, simple writing like the Chimamanda. So that's what I wanted to mention here, that I'm excited to hear that there's a place for, simple, plain, relatable, realistic writing that doesn't always have to be very complex, or because sometimes it feels like that's the only time you're being very creative. You're able to mix and match all these complexities. Yes, it's good to hear that. I'm glad to hear from you that. So I'll just go ahead and continue my simple writing. But is there a line? Is there a line between just simple writing and non-technical? Does it always have to be technical? The techniques to writing, the figures of speech, the language, voice, and all of that. Is there a line where it's easy to fall out because you're just trying to be really simple, so you become exceedingly simple?
Yes, there is a line. Simplicity doesn't mean lack of technique. There has to be, and simple does not even mean everyday speech in that sense. It's a funny thing, but it's very relatable. It's very accessible. People feel like, man, this is so. They feel like this is what I hear every day, and yet there is a quality to it that makes it elevates it to art. Yes, it is constructed. It's not just that you just wrote it the way somebody would just talk without thinking. Yes, you actually thought about it, and yes, you actually thought about it and actually created it. So yes, you always have to pay close attention to the technique. To the techniques, they are important. Like they said, it's better to know the rules and break them, than to break them out of ignorance. There are no hard and fast rules in writing. It's not a science, but the rules are also there for a reason. So it's best to know them. But then if you're trying to write and achieve a certain objective and the rules are not helping, then you shouldn't be afraid to bend and break the rules, because that's how innovation, and that's what innovation and creativity is about. Following your intuition as an artist and being confident to do that. So yes, simplicity, but it's important to know that simplicity is not lack of technique, and simplicity is also not lazy writing. It's not that I just write how I feel or how I talk. Sometimes simplicity actually takes a lot of thought and construction to make it very simple, but still serve an artistic purpose, so that whenever you're called back, you can actually explain the technique in what you're writing. I don't know if that helps, Chidera.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you very much. Okay.
Thank you. Any other questions, people? I'll read the chat.
Yes,
later, but
please.
if you ask me a question in the chat, now reading please go ahead.
All right. Yes, please. I have a comment, basically. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can
Hello.
hear you loud and clear.
All right. Okay. Thanks. I've actually learned a lot. I've actually learned a lot today and reaffirmed a lot of things. My role models when it comes to poetry are like classic poets, classic English and American poets. So first and foremost, I'm a page poet. and been trying to make this transition into performance poetry. Yeah, so until I get there, basically. So for now, are we going to have any session from you, or are you going to have an event that discusses further on how to properly market or how to properly grow the page poetry game?
Yeah. Okay. That's also a good question. At this festival, we're not going to have another workshop. Even though yesterday, I don't know why you missed that. Yesterday, there was a workshop that focused on, well, it wasn't on poetry specifically, but it was just on marketing sort of prose and making prose work commercially. But in terms of poetry, just hold on. Okay, we're done. Oh, no problem, sir. Everywhere, correct. Thank you, sir. Well done. Sorry about that. So in terms of marketing poetry, Abubakar, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I'm with you.
Okay. In terms of marketing poetry, particularly page poetry, I would say that the point I made earlier about sort of making a name for yourself is key. And this is not necessarily, page poetry also has a niche market. It's not the populist market. There are not a lot of poems that have been able to cross over to the popular market. Maybe just a few of them in terms of everybody knowing about it. But it's a niche market. And the currency for page poetry is critical acclaim, much more than money. What you get from page poetry is critical acclaim. That is being well known and well respected in the literary circle. And it is that fame, that critical acclaim that you can monetize much more than your poetry collection in itself, if you know what I mean. So you can monetize your fame, by being invited to do workshops, to give lectures, things like that. That's how you monetize the critical acclaim you've gotten from publishing poetry. But it's very rare that you would directly make a lot of money from publishing page poetry in itself, unless you're able to have interesting collaborations with your page poems. Maybe somebody samples it in their song, or it's used in a movie, or it makes its way into a play, or things like that. Those kind of collaborations, or is used as some kind of textbook or reference material in schools or academic environments. Being able to market your poems in that regard. Again, please hold on. Give me a minute. Well done, sir. Good afternoon. Well done. Yes, no problem. Well done, no. Thank you. I'll find out. So, how you did? Well done. Sorry again for that interruption. So, Albaka. So, in terms of marketing poetry, these are some of the page poetry. These are some of the realities. Now, in terms of acquiring critical acclaim or respect in that world with your page poetry, you have to. I encourage you from now to start, when you write poems, send them to literary magazines, poetry magazines. There are so many of them online. Just form a habit, aggressively send your poems out. The more poems you have published in all these magazines, I don't know the correct one, but when I was at that stage, there was Wasafiri, there was Sentinel, there were a couple of them, and you send your poems out to all these places because it helps your CV. It's like an academic career. The more publications you have, the better for you. So form the habit of sending your poems out to all these kinds of spaces. Well done, oh. How I did. Afternoon. Sorry, I just came like this. No problem. No problem. No problem. Thank you. Thank you. So please form the habit now, Abubakar, of sending your poems out to these literary magazines. Start from that, start collecting individual publications like that, one poem here, one poem there, one poem there. And then put together a compilation and see if you can find a publisher. It can be very difficult to find a publisher, a traditional publisher for poetry. If you're fortunate, you'll find one. If not, you may have to publish yourself. And then really begin to look at acquiring further, maybe apply for fellowships, apply for residencies, apply, to do to get qualifications in creative writing, and see if you can also expand your repertoire, so that you don't just know how to write poetry, you can write other things. So these are some of the practical things you can do as a page poet, to really pursue that success. Like I said, if you can have critical acclaim, you may not be known in the wider society, but if you're well respected within the literary circle, you can begin to monetize that. You can begin to do workshops. You can begin to give presentations and things like that that can also help you earn from your craft. I hope that helps.
Yes. Thank you very much. That was very helpful.
So any other questions, please? Everybody is good. Everybody is happy.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I wanted to give other people a chance to speak, but my other question is regarding how do you, what kind, you mentioned earlier about the kind of poetry that you write and how it has to be grounded. If you're trying to answer, I guess, the public marketplace poetry that breaks into pop culture, it needs to be grounded in the real experiences of people, and not just maybe not just aesthetic and stuff like that. But is there room for poetry that is maybe aesthetic but also able to break into more pop culture spaces? Because in my own poetry, I do a lot of fragmentation, but I fragment folklore and fairy tales and traditional childhood games and things like that. So there is I play with form a lot, but the content is hopefully relatable, identifiable, etc. So I don't know, I'm kind of curious. That's something that I've kind of had difficulty with in terms of performing, as well as in terms of just finding a place for it here, because so far I've only really finding a place for it, in pop culture, because so far I've only really done the whole submitting to journals and collections and things like that process. But I would want to perform it, but I don't know if there is a space for it. I guess that's my question.
There is a space. Interesting enough, I know a lady here in Abuja that recently began to have started to perform sort of folk tales and folk stories. And she's still experimenting with it, but she started on a small scale. So I went for her event a couple of weeks ago, where she performed a folk tale. And she narrated it and had some musical accompaniment and some little sort of puppet shows, and so it's doable. There is definitely, most definitely a space for it. Most definitely a space for it. All you need to crack is the best way to perform it. All you need to crack now is, okay, what's the best way to perform my stories? And folk tales are definitely part of our local culture here. One, also the language in which you express the folk tale. Sometimes all it takes is infusing some of the contemporary Niger speak into, so the story is whatever the story, even if you want to write about life on Mars, it's not, I'm not saying don't tell esoteric stories. I'm not saying don't tell out of the world stories. I'm not saying all your stories must be set in Maraba or whatever. No, you can tell whatever story you want to say. I'm saying the language in which you tell the story, the imagery that you use when people are talking and they're trying to explain things. If you infuse Niger speak into it, then it's a hook for the popular market. It's a hook for the local audience to tap into whatever you're saying. So if you come for a lot of my,
sometimes I'm discussing economic concepts and socio-political concepts that, because I studied law, I read law in university. I did a postgraduate degree in law and development, and that's still my passion. So sometimes I'm talking about concepts I learned intellectually in class, wrote dissertations on, but I'm performing it on stage. I'm using Niger speak to talk about very intellectual concepts. So it's not what you're talking about that matters. It's how you're talking about it. It's the language. You have to take the audience into consideration. If you use the language, whatever story you're telling, you can sell it to this audience. Is the language that matters, So infusing Niger speak into whatever story you're telling makes it more marketable to the Nigerian audience, which is a very important audience. And in terms of folk tales, it's really a question of how best do I perform it? Do I do it as a stage? Should I just do it as a stage performance? Or should I do it as a solo performance and just have some, the sound of, so the whole thing is your performance. Hello?
Hi, DK. Yeah, I think I lost the last part of what you said. So you said, do I perform it as a stage performance, and then I lost the rest of what you were saying.
Okay. I'm just saying that you just need to crack the code on how do you want to perform your, the folk tales or what your material, how do you want to perform it? So do you want to stage it as a play, as it's a multicast play? People are playing, like if you're writing about the baboon and the monkey or whatever, where you have people playing baboon and monkey, or do you want to do it as, a narration where you're just on stage telling the story, and then you have things enhancing the story in the background? You can have video projection in the background, or you can have audio soundtracks, things like that. So it's just about how do you want to tell it? How do you want to perform it? So that was the last point I made.
Great, thank you so much.
Yeah.
That's really helpful. Thank you.
I have a question, sir.
Yes, please. Okay.
Okay, sir. So I'm thinking of like doing the kind of things you do in Simply Poetry, like the whole poetry, spoken word theater. Yeah. So how would you? I don't really have a clue. I think it is one of the most artist society I know. How would you advise I go towards collaborations? Because I'm thinking collaborations since I don't exactly know a lot of people that are into theater. So what would you advise for someone that's just like beginning? What would you advise I do? And that's one for spoken word theater. Also, you talked about social advocacy, and I see a couple of your videos online with a lot of brands, or not like big those people like economic platforms and those. How do you like penetrate that market? How, besides maybe I don't know, maybe they are your natural network already, but say they're not my natural network, how would you advise I penetrate that kind of market, those kind of people or organizations? Should I like send letters, or how?
Hello?
Yes, sir. Did you hear me?
I heard you.
I don't know if
Okay, sir.
coming soon. I heard you. You're asking if it was my natural network or that's where I lost you or something. You're asking how do I break into that market, right?
Yes, sir. If it's your natural network, and if okay, say it's not my natural network, how would you advise you get penetrate that market?
Okay, those are very good questions. Now, in terms of breaking into spoken word theater, I'll be very practical. Now, from what you just said, from your question, I can tell that like when you talk about collaborations, the spoken word theater is different. Spoken word theater is different from like doing a show with 6 or 7 other spoken word acts. So where you guys take turns, you perform, the next person comes to perform, the next person comes to perform. That's not spoken word theater. You know, that's for semantics, it's a spoken word show. So one performer after another. Give me 1 minute, let me just attend to something. Give me a minute. Okay, hello. Love it. Hello, love it. Are you there?
Yes, I'm here, sir.
Okay, you're here. Okay. So breaking into spoken word theater. Breaking into spoken word theater. You need to have, first of all, write a script, write a spoken word theater production. And what that entails is writing multiple poems that are linked by a cohesive narrative. Now we can, I don't have time to break that down if you don't fully understand it, but it's just writing multiple poems that are connected to form one comprehensive narrative, you know? So that you need a script. Now, in terms of linking up and finding, you know, dancers, actors, and other people to work with. So in this, if you're interested in something, if you give me an idea, and then with the community or whatever you want to put together. But the first thing is how do you break into those markets? Like I said, I score 0 when it comes to marketing, and I don't know how to market Hello? For goodness. Hello?
We can hear you.
Can hear you now.
Okay. So, love it. So essentially, it was my work that got me there. People came, watched, and said, "Come and do this and come and do that." But now, I'm in a position where a lot of work that comes to me, I turn down because, like I said, there are many things I'm not really interested in. So I help channel work to a lot of other poets at the moment, you know. So I don't know why I've never even sent you to one of those places. But now that you have said it, I'll put you in my head, ferals, and you just say, you can also do it. I need a poet or something. You can always just say, I know a poet that can help you out there. You know, so that's how it works. So it's pieces talking about thinking to break into work for me. You know, but beyond that, it's also about networking. And now that I know, or you've registered in my consciousness, so whenever I get work like that, I'll refer you to places like that. And once you start going to places like that, you then make more connections to even more places like that. You know, so that's it. So people, hello, can everybody hear me? Because
Yes, I can hear you now.
Yes, DK.
Yes, we can hear you now. Thank you.
At this point, I'll have to go because I have honorable.
Thank you.
Okay. I went meeting by I went committee. Which committee? Public accounts.
So, I mean, it's been a brilliant workshop from DK. I think we all agree it was incredible. Even myself, I'm not much of a poet, but I learned a lot. So thank you guys. If you want the video, we'll be uploading it.
Sorry, let me just sign up properly. Sorry,
Okay,
guys, I was interrupted. I'm heading for a meeting, but I'll close it out here. It was lovely talking with all of you. You asked the sorts of questions that I need you to ask, and I hope I will reconnect later. Okay.
Thanks, DK.
All right. I mean, DK had to take time out of his very, very busy schedule to handle this. So if you'd like the video, we'll be uploading it on a closed link. You can just email us and we'll send you the link. As you know, this is the Abuja Literature and Arts Festival. Tomorrow we have a screenwriting workshop. For those of you that are thinking about breaking into screenwriting as another way to earn money from your art. So that's by Aishat Abiri. I just want to remind us again that we have this intensive bootcamp for creatives on Friday. So at that workshop, you can win, up to, I think the first prize is 200,000 naira to finance a creative project that you're currently pursuing. So to sign up for that, just tell us about the project in a few lines, and you can send it to submissions@ALITFEST.com or info@ALITFEST.com. And guys, we're working really hard to put this together. So anytime you can share feedback or comments on Instagram or Twitter with the hashtag, we'd very much appreciate it. The email to reach out to is info@ALITFEST.com or submissions@ALITFEST.com. So you can also find the websites on the emails on all our flyers and on the website as well. So yes, this was a brilliant session. I wish you the very best with the rest of your days. Yeah.
Thanks, Danny. Thanks, everyone.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Danny. Thanks, ALITFEST.
Thank you.
Thank you. God bless you.
This was incredible. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. I really gained from this a lot.